So what happens is that when you are initiated into a religion or into a spiritual path, they take your attention up and they unite it with whatever the spiritual essence is on that path. They only see their own path. So one of the things that we have been able to do because we work on the bridge path, we're not limited to that perspective. We can see the whole thing. We can see all of that which is in the subtle. We can see all of that which is in the planetary and the transplanetary and the cosmic, and every path is supercosmic, and every path on the transcendental.
George Boyd is the founder of the Mudrashram Institute of Spiritual Studies, author of 18 books, and a spiritual cartographer. Through the Mudrashram lineage, he reveals how it's possible to see, understand, and even traverse all spiritual paths and potentials active on the continuum of consciousness in a single lifetime.
So imagine that in one lifetime, instead of simply moving forward and say, okay, I'm moving forward a little bit here, and I am going to bring in this next level. Imagine if you could bring in all of the potentials, all the ability, all of the wisdom and knowledge, all of the love and virtue that's on these higher levels that you didn't open up in those past lives. So your past lives represent where you got to, how you got to where you are now. But these abilities are, you can say that they're like bodies of light that dwell on this continuum. And they have certain abilities that are not accessible at other levels of the continuum.
He reveals that when we have the right techniques and sequencing, we can massively accelerate our personal evolution.
So when you focus the light of spirit using an appropriate transformational method, you can move through 3, 4, 5 nodal points in a day. That's the equivalent of anywhere between 33 and 55 years of living.
George's teachings offer a framework for not just spiritual evolution, but activation of our full potential.
You know, this is where we're talking about a being which is absolutely unfathomable in consciousness, who keeps track of billions and billions of universes. Okay, it's big. This being has a plan. And so at a certain time, they activate a lineage in the supercosmic. At a certain time, they bring in a certain teaching. And so my job is, as a lineage holder of the Mudrashram tradition, is to show people their full potential and to give them a means to fulfill that potential.
Before we get into this conversation, I want to ask you to join this amazing community of consciousness explorers. This whole idea of pursuing expanded consciousness and the boundaries of human potential while living a modern life is relatively new, which is why we interview revered masters, teachers, experts, and practitioners to help you on your own journey. To stay up to date on the latest conversations, simply click subscribe below and you'll be notified each time a new episode comes out. I am so grateful for all of your support and comments. I love reading them. Now let's dive into this conversation. George, here we are. It's great to see you, man.
Yes, thanks for inviting me.
Well, after taking the Mudrashram 10-week meditation course, I'm fresh off of that. There's lots of things I'm excited to pick your brain about, but I think maybe we could start the conversation with a little bit of background on you. And I believe, we don't have to get into your whole spiritual journey, which I know there's a lot of great information on the Mudrashram website, which we'll link out to, where people can read all about your journey. But it seemed like there was a particular inflection point in 1983 for you as it pertains to what you're doing today. Could you share a little bit about what happened?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started with meditation in 1965. I went to a variety of paths, like many of the people might be listening, trying on different things. I studied with 3 different spiritual traditions, actually 4 different spiritual traditions. And in 1983, I was empowered by a newly emerging lineage, which is called the Mudrashram lineage. And it's founded very high on the continuum of consciousness, which we'll basically detail a little bit later in the conversation here as we get around to it. But anyway, I was empowered at that level and I was given a course to teach. I still teach the same course today, the Mudrashram Master Course in Meditation. And I have expanded this out to many, many different other offerings for people who have different needs. Um, we are the author of 19 print books and 14 ebooks. So we have had a very prolific downpour of information and sharing that hopefully you will find helpful to you in your journey.
Well, thank you. And I think when people like, okay, so you were empowered to teach this, to the extent you feel comfortable sharing, how what happened? How were you given this information to start to bring into the world?
Where we get our information are from the masters of our lineage. So there's a series of masters that stands behind our lineage. And I have had contact with them really since 1975, and I've been gathering information. And so in 1983, they, over a period of time from 75 to 83, they prepared me to become a lineage holder, which means that I am empowered to present these teachings on behalf of the lineage and to share it with humanity at different levels of development, whatever they can. So we've developed programs to help them at different levels. So the actual empowerment experience is you are simply anointed by the divine light and fire. And that happens to every living tradition. There is an initiate who is empowered to actually teach and to actually bring forward the teachings. And the experience of it is that suddenly you're connected with this great infinite power and force and grace and love that's kind of beyond words to talk about, but that's what happened.
Yeah, and I think part of what I was trying to point to is that this information was like given to you in meditation. It wasn't like you were at a study hall in the middle of some far off country. You were connecting with these masters essentially an altered state of consciousness.
Yeah. Well, again, you and I are talking at the physical level, but as our spiritual essence, what we call in our tradition the attentional principle, you're not limited to being here at the physical. You can go up onto a higher plane and you can talk to one of the masters just as clearly as you and I are talking. And it's not like, it's a conversation that they're giving. And sometimes they'll say, all right, here's some ideas we want to share with humanity. Take dictations. I write it down, put it into a written form.
Now, I know one of the core concepts of Mudrashram and as well as our conversation today is the consciousness continuum. Could you describe what that is?
Yes. They're basically four bands of the mind. The first is the conscious mind, and this is the level in which we experience what's going on right now in our present time. Those of you who do mindfulness or vipassana know that if you focus at a certain level, you're going to become aware that everything rises and passes away. This is your conscious mind. At the center of the conscious mind is what we call the ego, and this is the part of us that's embedded in our life. Now, the second level is the subconscious mind, and this contains our memory and then all the functions that operate in the background in the dream state, sound sleep state. The executive functions of the personality are found in the metaconscious mind, and this includes functions like the ability to make a commitment, the ability to use social skills, the ability to check with your sense of ethics, and your conscience, the ability to set goals and plan, the ability to use your intellect to solve problems, the ability to check in with yourself. At the core of the personality, we have will and we have the self. And the will is the part of you that runs everything. You make a decision and you act on it. Now, the superconscious mind contains every variety of spiritual experience that humanity has ever come up with. And we divide it into several different levels. The first is a subtle realm, and that typically is a lot of the mythological religions that we know in ancient cultures. So your your East Indian civilization, ancient Chinese civilization, Greco-Roman, etc. Then there's the planetary realm. This is where most of modern humanity is operating from. And this is where we have science. This is where we have our Judeo-Christian religions. This is where we have the mystery schools. This is where we have the ascended masters. And overseeing this entire realm of the planetary realm are a series of masters. We call them planetary adepts. And so this is the realm in which most of our modern humanity is operating. But beyond that, there's what we call the transplanetary, and that's a whole higher scale of evolution. And that involves a third spiritual essence. So beyond that, there is a higher octave of being that we call the monad or the paramatma, and that evolves in its cycle. Then we have the next higher octave, which is the astral soul, which evolves in the cosmic, the supercosmic soul, which evolves in the supercosmic sphere. And then there are 8 paths in this highest realm of the continuum that we call the transcendental. And it is on one of these levels, on the what we call the bridge path, is where our lineage is anchored. So if you imagine a series of phonograph records stacked one on another, ours is the one on the bottom. So, and then above that are paths like the Subud tradition, Satmat, Meher Baba. Some people know about Ekankar, which is the 5th. And the 7th is the teaching of my second teacher, Sadhguru Yogeswar.
I think this is really interesting because it kind of finds it's like I've heard you talk about this before, where the view of God is curved, right? And it kind of explains why we have all these different traditions pointing us all these different places. I'd love for you to explain this concept and then bring it back to the continuum.
Yes. Okay. So what happens is that when you are initiated into a religion or into a spiritual path, they take your attention up and they unite it with whatever the spiritual essence is on that path. We typically refer to this as a nucleus of identity, but it is a state of identity. And when you look from that perspective and you look on the inner horizon, you see whatever form of God is there. So, for example, if for whatever reason you're operating in the first band and the subtle, and you're in this realm where we have the archetypes of the Greco-Roman civilization, and you look on your inner horizon, you say, "Oh, look, there's the pantheon. There's Zeus and there's Hera and there's Apollo," and that's what you see on your inner horizon. Now, if you transform and you go beyond that horizon, you say, "Oh, there's a whole other world here." So this is the reason why people say, well, don't you see God looks like this? Well, from that perspective, God looks like that. And I don't want to discount that. God does look like that from that perspective. But if you go beyond that, you say, oh, there's a whole other form of God up here. There's a whole other world up here. And so this is one of the reasons why, for example, if you got initiated into one of the paths in the supercosmic, say a path on the Shiva plane, and that Shiva is one of the 3 personages of the Godhead that they talk about in Hinduism. And you look on the inner horizon and say, look, Shiva's on that inner horizon. That's the highest thing. That's the greatest thing. And someone else is going on a Sufi path on the what we call the Allah plane. And they're saying, look, there's the light in the sky, the divine light. That's the light of God. Don't you see? That's the highest thing. But what they don't see is they don't see the big picture about what is the whole continuum. I'm looking from this perspective, I'm seeing that, but what is this whole, what are the 73 paths that are active in the supercosmic? They only see their own path. So one of the things that we have been able to do, because we work on the bridge path, we're not limited to that perspective. We can see the whole thing. We can see all of that which is in the subtle. We can see all of that which is in the planetary and the transplanetary and the cosmic and every path of the supercosmic and every path on the transcendental. That's why we can say, okay, well, the reason you're seeing that and it looks that way is because you are identified with this spiritual essence right here. And so when you're doing whatever transformation you're doing and approaching that essence, it looks, well, that's the highest thing. I'm going to reach that. I'm going to reach this beatific state. I'm going to get nirvana or whatever you call it, moksha, uh, union with the divine. But that's all they see. So this is a very unique perspective because we're not limited to say, well, okay, on my inner horizon, I'm identified with this Christ child or moon soul nucleus of identity and what we call the first exoteric initiation. I look on my inner horizon and there's the God that is in history. And I'm waiting for, that God and the human history to come do miracles in my life. And that's what you see in your inner horizon, but you don't realize behind that there's all these other levels. So the unique thing that the Mudrashram lineage has brought out is that we say, okay, well, these are the different perspectives. These are the different forms of God that are on the continuum. So you understand that when you evolve spiritually from, say, you move from the psychic realm and you're looking at the mother, father, God, and you move on to the wisdom plane and you're looking at the son of wisdom, move into the first exoteric, which is the social religions. You say, okay, well, there's that form of God that expressed in history. You go to the mesoteric and you say, oh, on the inner horizon, there is the Father God that Jesus talked about, surrounded by all the saints and the angels, and so on throughout the continuum. So the essence of this is that where do you put your attention? Once you put your attention on, you spend some time there, then you start to identify with this. Oh, this is who I am. I'm actually this moon soul or Christ child. I'm actually cosmic consciousness. I'm actually this spiritual essence on this Shiva path. And then that conditions what they're seeing on their horizon.
It reminds me of why you often hear, well, people die and some people see Jesus and then some people see Shiva and then some people see, the gates of heaven or whatever it is. It's like, it seems like our capacity is to see any of those things.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just this a general lack of awareness around this idea that what we focus on and where we end up is generally what unfolds.
Well, again, your after-death experience is conditioned by where you're focused on the continuum. So the Tibetan Buddhists talk about the bardo, and they talk about these experiences that happen, and people who are identified with that spiritual essence will probably experience that type of after-death experience.
I think one of the things that intrigued me about the Mudrashram studies, which I've dipped my toes in the water with the 10-week course and some reading, is that we can experience theoretically all of these experiences while still being incarnate here as a human, which is, I would say a pretty non-traditional view. For example, I remember you talked about a certain stage in the continuum where you do a life review while you're alive. You can see your entire life as if, like supposedly people do when they die, except you can get to that stage of consciousness and have that experience while you're alive and remember your past lives, which I know you have had that experience. And so, yeah, I'd be curious to get your perspective, how people should think about, this capacity in a path like this, what it could mean for them.
If we think about spiritual evolution, okay, when we talk about spiritual evolution, I like to get out my little flute here. And imagine this golf ball is your soul. And the soul sits in what we call a nodal point. It sits on its own plane and it's in this little vibration of light. Imagine like a radio station, you're hearing a clear signal. Between that and the next radio station, there's static. That is what we call the karma, the unconscious material separating you from this next nodal point. So normally, if we lead a decent life and we don't do heinous sins, just the force of us processing our lives, going through things in about 11 or 12 years, you are able to move forward one nodal point. You move from here to there. Now, if you have a transformational method that draws down the light of spirit, I like to use my example. Have you ever used a magnifying glass? Okay. And focus the light of the sun. You actually like burn your initials. Some people do that. They burn their initials and the initials of their girlfriend or boyfriend, and stuff. So when you focus the light of spirit using an appropriate transformational method, you can move through 3, 4, 5 nodal points in a day. That's the equivalent of anywhere between 33 and 55 years of living. And again, if you're doing this on a regular basis, you will accelerate your spiritual evolution so that you are able to open up all your buried potential. So let's say right now you are in the abstract mind plane. So you have access to those abilities. You have access to the abilities of what we call the biophysical universe, which you developed on the subtle. But when you evolve into the psychic realm, and suddenly you have access to those abilities, that knowledge, to those virtues that are developed at that level. You develop to the next level. You have access to the levels of the wisdom plane. Rinse and repeat. You move through each level. The planetary, you have access to all of the abilities in the planetary, all of the abilities in the transplanetary, in the cosmic, super cosmic. On your, what we call your line transitional path, you do one of them first, and then you get onto the bridge path. So you're opening up your potential for service. You're opening your potential for ministry. If you're a coach, you're opening up new potentials to do coaching, to guide people, to help people. You can look into deeper aspects of what's going on in people's unconscious minds if you're a therapist. So if you have the keys to transformation, everything that is stored up in you becomes actual. Right now, it's potential, but you make it kinetic. You actually turn it into light so the soul can actually begin to use it.
And that kind of concept of having these latent potentials, we would consider that an accumulation of all experiences that we've had across all lifetimes to date. Is that fair?
Well, actually, in each lifetime, you think about that the soul is incarnate in each lifetime. So the soul is coming down, animating whatever personality is developed in that life, whatever language, whatever culture, and then it's anchoring the light right in your life. So you're experiencing life, whatever it is. I was you say, well, okay, I was someone who was working the rice paddies in Vietnam 4 lifetimes ago, whatever it is. So you're bringing in that knowledge at that particular level. So imagine that in one lifetime, instead of simply moving forward and say, okay, I'm moving forward a little bit here, and I am going to bring in this next level. Imagine if you could bring in all of the potentials, all the abilities, all of the wisdom and knowledge, all of the love and virtue that's on these higher levels that you didn't open up in those past lives. So your past lives represent where you got to, how you got to where you are now. But these abilities are, you can say that they're like bodies of light that dwell on this continuum. And they have certain abilities that are not accessible at other levels of the continuum. So if you're in the abstract mind plane, you have the ability to control your body, think sports, science, art, philosophy. You can tap into the issues of the past through your Akashic records. You can begin to create what you want on what we call the dynamic creation subplane, and begin to align with the laws of life. And that's what your abilities are. But when you move into the psychic realm, then you start to gain what we call some of the psychic powers. You might learn how to channel. You might learn how to do different attunements. So these are abilities that are not available on the abstract mind plane, but they are available in the psychic realm. And Ditto for the wisdom plane, new abilities. First exoteric, new abilities. First mesoteric, new abilities. So this is what happens as you actually open up your potential.
Let's talk about bringing your whole self to work. If you're like many executives, including myself at one point, you might be living a double life. You have your personal career, and then you have your personal growth journey. Conscious Talent is changing that as the world's first executive talent firm specializing in connecting leaders and companies who embrace inner work. Imagine finding job opportunities where your contemplative practice, latest retreat experience, and commitment to your personal evolution are seen as strengths, not secrets. What if you actually felt like your career supported this aspect of your life versus competed with it? Conscious Talent is building a community of leaders and companies who are committed to both combining professional excellence with personal transformation. If you're ready to merge your two worlds with a fully aligned career, join the movement at conscioustalent.com. Here you can sign up for our talent collective to stay on top of future opportunities or find your next transformative team member. One of the interesting things about the continuum for me as I learned about it in the Mudrashram perspective is I noticed that a lot of, as this kind of global awakening's happening, and I don't know if you're familiar with the telepathy tapes, there's all this excitement around special abilities, right? and the mudra, and there's also, I would say, in somewhat a cultural association with those in evolution where, someone can see an aura or someone's psychic or someone's whatever. Wow, they're so spiritual. But it seems like it just, and correct me if I'm wrong, in the Mudrashram perspective, there actually becomes a period of time in the wisdom plane where the focus is more on working on karma than the cultivation of those abilities. And I thought this was a unique idea that I would love for you to highlight.
Well, let's give a overview of the psychic realm. Any of you who are interested, I have a book called The Psychic Realm, Finding Safe Passage Through the Worlds of Illusion. But this being said, the psychic realm has 7 subplanes. The first is what we call the materialization, dematerialization subplane. Think doomsday scenarios, think utopian scenarios. This is the first thing you do. Next level, the psychic power subplane. This is where you awaken to whatever your innate psychic powers are. Next level is what we call the healing subplane. This is where people learn to become healers. You do study to become a intuitive. Okay, you learn about tarot or astrology, or you learn about some of the alternative healing methods. Heavenly realm subplane, you learn about contacting guides, you learn about meeting with your departed relatives, communing with angels and ascended masters, and you get all kinds of messages. The next subplane is one of my favorites. We call it the Pleiadian vortex subplane. This is where you meet with the UFOs, the extraterrestrial. Nice. Okay, it's cool.
Who doesn't like that?
Yeah, okay. And then the next level is we call it the astral form subplane. And this is where what we call the personality shells of every person that's ever lived dwells at that level. So you want to talk to Elvis, you could interview Elvis. So you want to talk to, one of my favorites is Marilyn Monroe. We have an ongoing discussion, me and Marilyn. And then the psychic guide subplane, which is where you're able to see this from the other side, and then you're able to help people go through these different levels. So this is where you're developing abilities. And this is what William Blake called the realm of the divine imagination. So people get all these crazy and wacky ideas. And, the guide comes in and says, "Oh, you were a prince in Atlantis."
There's a lot of people doing that right now, by the way. A lot of high priestesses out there.
That's right. But once you reach the wisdom plane, you start looking at what you created. I often say it's sort of like, you've been to the wild, you had a wild party at your house. And the next day you wake up, you're recovering from your hangover, and you're like, "Oh my God, what'd I do? All these glasses are all hung, and somebody barfed in the corner of the room." So on the wisdom plane, you clean up all the craziness that you did. So you really get in touch with, okay, what do I really want to create? What's in touch with my real sense of values? You learn about forgiveness. You learn about really to understand where people are coming from instead of just making assumptions about them. And ultimately, you discover, okay, what are my particular special gifts that I have to offer? There are all these different areas, but maybe I excel in this one area. And you learn about what karma is. How does karma operate? So it's a very important stage in your spiritual development because it prepares you to enter into the 5 planetary initiations, which is where you begin to actually interface with that being that people call God, that life that pervades the entire planetary sphere. This is where you enter the stream, as the Buddhists call it, and you begin to be overshadowed by that great light, which guides you through the 5 initiations.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it's super interesting. And I remember just a funny anecdote, my second psychedelic experience was my first real telepathic experience. And I realized that I could focus my attention on any person and have a conversation with them. And then after that point, I just realized that that's just there, that's just a capacity that's unlearned. And it's just so interesting to just, it really is in many ways, and maybe this only applies if you've been through the psychic realm, that there's all these things that the only thing that blocks you from tapping into them is an awareness that they exist.
Well, yes. I mean, so let's think about if the psychic realm is here and your soul is over here. So you can do practices that'll take you up into the psychic realm, but you're not embodying it. Okay. So when the soul actually moves up to the level where you are in the psychic realm, you're actually embodying those things. They're integrated into you. They're a part of you. You can use them.
Let's talk about the cutting edge of spirituality, which kind of relates to this concept.
The cutting edge of spirituality is, it's kind of a unique concept that we have developed in Mudrashram. Now, many people will go to, say, what we call a yogi preceptor. And yogi preceptor is a master that dwells in the first cosmic initiation. And so when you go to a yogi preceptor is going to say, oh, my child, your true nature is cosmic consciousness. You are veiled from your true identity, which is Brahman. And what you have to do is you have to destroy this Maya, which separates you from God, and then you gain God realization. But what's happening is that they're training you to identify with something other than that which is actually embodied. The cutting edge of spirituality is the energy that animates one of the 13 ensouling entities. Any who are interested in learning what those ensouling entities are, there's an article on our website called The Great Continuum of Consciousness. I suggest that you look at it so you understand what the heck I'm talking about. So we look for a divine light that actually is anchored in the soul, in the cutting edge of spirituality. So it's like a pointing finger of God that's saying, this is your cutting edge. And the way we know it's the cutting edge, because that aspect of your nature is expressed through your personality and in your life. So you are embodied living that. And as you move into higher octaves of being, then you begin to gain the ability to minister, to send the light, to teach from those higher octaves of being. But it continues to be embodied. It's not like you're splitting yourself off. Because what we see, and there's another article there that on that OpenStax page, talking about the cutting edge of spirituality. What we see is that, let's say your soul is your cutting edge, and people go up to cosmic consciousness and they start developing it. And at a certain point, there's what we call a fulcrum shift. And so suddenly you are no longer identified with your body and your life and your soul, but suddenly you're identified with cosmic consciousness. And when that takes place, we often see experiences like, the entire universe is unreal. Okay, my life is unreal. It's all Maya, it's illusion. And the issue with that is that you become split off. And when people become split off, they're very suggestive, they're very susceptible to suggestion. So they basically become a message for a spiritual group. Come to my spiritual group. My guru is the greatest guru. But they split off. And so instead of living their true nature, they're living something else. They're living some other agenda. And so when we identify the cutting edge of spirituality, number one, it teaches us how to, where we're going to do our spiritual work. There are techniques to develop you in the subtle, in the planetary, in the transplanetary, in the cosmic, in the supercosmic. On each of the paths are techniques, each of the transcendental paths. But if we don't know where to start you, we're going to create this imbalance in you. We're going to create this dichotomy. We're going to create this split in you. So ultimately you identify with this and you're in a state of great bliss. You might not be able to function. When I studied with my spiritual teachers, they taught me how to do this, and I couldn't function. I could not function. It took me years to get back to the point where, okay, I can really function in my personality again. So let's not create these splits. Let's finish the work at each level, but let's do it methodically. Now, let's start where you are. If you're in the planetary, let's start you there. If you're in the subtle, let's start you there. And let's take you step by step through each of the next levels in the planetary. Then let's take you through the transplanetary. Then let's take you through the cosmic, and not just the first cosmic, each of the cosmic initiations. Let's take you through the super cosmic if you haven't completed that path. Let's take you through the transcendental, your aligned transcendental path. Then let's finish all the other transcendental paths in a methodical, step-by-step way with instruction at each level where you are. I'm moving from the psychic realm into the wisdom plane. I give you new teachings, new lessons at that level, which is appropriate so you can understand where you are, the context of where you are. I'm not just going to throw you into the continuum and say, well, my child, take this mantra, repeat it 4,300,000 times. You will realize God. You'll realize Brahman.
Yeah, I mean, the way I relate to it is like you wouldn't start working out and be given an Olympic workout. You would be assessed with where you're at and kind of given something that's appropriate for your level of fitness. And I think it sounds like the same can be said if we seek to earnestly practice spiritual evolution safely and effectively.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, and the other thing about our system is that we don't teach you one technique. You go to a lot of different teachings and they say, oh, my child, I will give you a mantra. And other people say, I'm going to awaken your kundalini, right? And other people are saying, well, all you have to do is listen to the sound current. You'll unite with your spirit. You'll go back to God. But we have different methods to do different things. So in integral meditation, we give you a whole toolbox to do the different parts of what we call the great work. And that's where you're actually moving yourself in a balanced and integral way through each stage of your spiritual evolution.
And, this is something that I would say that I'm passionate about because I have personally met, known, and experienced to myself some extent spiritual imbalances where you get over your skis and you fry your nervous system. Or you have an incredibly destabilizing experience. And these are very real things that happen to people that are frankly, like I was just kind of didn't even know that was a potential. And so can you talk kind of about this like abacus metaphor and what a spiritual imbalance is and how they can arise?
Oh, well, you just cued me to bring out my abacus.
I mean, I love the teaching tools. So, we got to get visual. If you're listening to this, you can watch it on YouTube and see George in all his glory.
With my abacus. I'm actually here. I'm behind the abacus. So let's say that you get initiated by the super cosmic guru who shows you how to awaken the identification essence on a Shiva path. And so what happens if this is your aligned spirituality, we call this the axis of being, and you're opening this super cosmic path, and all of a sudden you're moving this aspect of your being out of alignment. Now, at a certain point, your energy is going to shift from from this alignment to all of a sudden you shift into this level. So it's like you have gone into a whole other state of consciousness. You have a new identity. I mean, these are very blissful states. I don't want to discount that. They're blissful. You feel a lot of love. But the issue is that at a certain point, it becomes almost impossible for you to function at this level. And you're basically living something else other than your, what you were born to do. I've been working with people since 2006. I have this service I do for the meditation community where I work with people who've had these Kundalini syndromes. And they have these Kundalini syndromes because they start fooling around with techniques that they don't know what the heck they're doing. They said, I saw it on the internet. I saw it on the internet. Okay. The guru was there. He showed me this technique. I did that technique. And oops. Oops.
Well, let's just say I can relate to those people.
I'm in this older state of consciousness. I can't come back. I can't function anymore. I want to do things, and I spent a long time doing this.
Well, I'm glad that you help people, and if there's people that are experiencing that, again, I know you have some great resources on your website, which we'll link out to. You did mention this idea of you doing what you came here to do. And another thing I appreciate about Mudrashram is the kind of different axes of purpose. Purpose is an interesting word. It's something that you hear a lot in our culture. And I know that you have a unique perspective on the different types of purpose that we have.
Well, there's actually a webinar where we explore these different aspects of purpose. But essentially, there are two aspects of what we call soul purpose. The first is what we call express soul purpose. And this is the one everybody wants to know. What the heck am I supposed to be doing here in this life? And for this one, you have to talk to your soul, right? You say, hey, soul, it's me. Remember me? And you talk to your soul. Your soul says, okay, I'm here to express these psychic powers, do this coaching program. This is why I'm here in this particular life. And then the other aspect of purpose, what we call intrinsic soul purpose. This has been called the divine plan, spiritual destiny. And this is your evolutionary track. So as you evolve, as you move from one nodal point to another, you're beginning to fulfill that intrinsic soul purpose. So that means you finish the subtle, you finish your work in the planetary, you finish your work in the transplanetary, in the cosmic, in the supercosmic, on each of the transcendental paths, and ultimately reach what we call the infinite stage, which is when you've turned all of the darkness on this continuum into light. We've actually had people who reach this stage right now, and they're moving on to, doing like high bodhisattva work, what we call multi-plane mastery in our tradition.
And they're still alive, living in a human body.
Oh, absolutely. We don't have to wait for the savior to come and guide us. I mean, we can begin to transform ourselves to move into our potential.
So have your master teachers explained to you why this path was opened up at this point in time for humanity?
That's a God question.
We'll save that one for the big guy. But what strikes me is that we've had this potpourri of different things you can do, right? It's like, oh, this person's go do Kriya yoga. Oh, I'm going to go do TM. Oh, I'm going to do Ekankar. I'm going to, and look, I've been a willful and excited participant in that. But I haven't really seen a lot of meta models of, hey, here's all the things and here's how you can move through all of them simultaneously. And hey, you can actually do it in one shot if you want, or you can go as much or as little as you want, like whatever you want to do. And it just strikes me that it's an interesting thing that this has been brought to this planet at this period of time, as there does seem to be also this very big awakening of consciousness that's happening.
Yes. This is where we're talking about a being which is absolutely unfathomable in consciousness, who keeps track of billions and billions of universes. Okay. It's big. Okay. Guys, it's big.
All right. Bigger than ChatGPT, everyone.
Yeah. Bigger. Yes. So in any case, this being has a plan. And so at a certain time, they activate a lineage in the supercosmic. At a certain time, they bring in a certain teaching in a transcendental path. At a certain time, they may anchor new teachings to bring humanity as a whole to a higher level. So this being said, we each do our humble part in whatever we have been given to do. And so my job is, as a lineage holder of the Mudrashram tradition, is to show people their full potential and to give them a means to fulfill that potential and give them a means to begin to do service in much greater ways than they currently conceive.
Well, that is a real service, what you do, George. And, I'm excited to be spreading the message. And I think, one of the interesting things that I've come across in my studies and interacting with lots of people that are on this path is a lot of people have this idea that, oh, well, I'm going to go study the Vedas because it's however many thousand years old, or I'm going to go study Zen because it's been around for 2000 years. And that means that it must be more valuable. And the notion of like divinely guided innovation in some of these pathways is a perspective that I think a lot of people fail to see. And I would just be curious to get your perspective on that, even though it seems like we kind of already talked about it a little bit.
Well, like I say, the divine sends certain lineages, it manifests certain lineages. So let's talk about what a lineage is. So let's talk about let's talk about, for example, the Hare Krishna movement. Okay. So there was a root teacher where they anchored the light of the lineage, and then that was passed on from teacher to teacher to teacher to teacher to the most recent proponent, Bhaktivedanta Swami. And then he, in turn, has empowered his advanced disciples to continue the mission. Well, there is a need for certain people to receive a certain instruction. And so that's the reason why they're different. So we say they're different archetypes, different ideas, different abilities, different virtues that are developed on each supercosmic path. And certain ones, because of what their aeonic mission is, which is veiled to most people at this point, but for certain reasons, their supercosmic soul is on that path, and they need to learn those lessons to be able to fulfill what they were sent here to do. And I just want to underscore that we discover what we were sent here to do as we evolve. We learn more about it.
When you say ionic mission, is that what you're referencing?
Aeonic mission means the totality of everything you were meant to do through all the ages and all the different levels of the continuum. And so when we say that when you reach the infinite stage, you now have the full potential to begin to work on your aeonic mission, to do whatever service you're meant to do at whatever levels of the continuum that you've prepared yourself to do.
There's this chain image that I have in my notes from the course that I think is pretty interesting about kind of who's in charge, right? There's the personal will, and then there's the soul, and then there's the divine, and there's who is ultimately deciding all of this, and how is all this working? And I am curious to get your
Okay,
thoughts
well,
on that.
let's use the analogy of a corporation. Okay. So if you are doing your job in the corporation, let's say you have a job and you're doing your job, you're working there. And then you have a manager who's making sure that you're getting the work done. And ultimately you have the ultimate boss who is saying, okay, well, we want to look at the big picture here and the whole mission about why we're doing all this. So your personal will, which is anchored in what we call the human self, is the part that operates the three aspects of your personality: your conscious mind, your subconscious mind, your metaconscious mind. And this is the part of you that's able to plan, that's able to actually carry out and achieve your goals, carry out your, whatever your projects are, whatever you set for yourself. But, if this was not guided by the soul, then, you say, well, I know I was born to open a hotel on Bimini.
Hey, nothing wrong with that. If that's,
Yeah,
if that's what
there's
you want
nothing
to
wrong with opening a hotel
do.
on Bimini if your soul's telling you to do that. But if you're not guided, you can say, oh, that sounds good. I can do that. I can do this. But the soul guides you. And ultimately, the divine will is the part of you that's saying, okay, soul, we're going to move through all these levels of evolution so you actualize your full potential, and that inner essence in you fully flowers and you have all your abilities. So you turn into what we call an initiate or a master. The divine will is the one that actually is guiding your spiritual evolution. And so the being that we call in our tradition your supervising initiate is the person who's in touch with the divine will and is guiding you at each stage, helping you undergo your initiation, moving from nodal point to nodal point along this continuum of light, and ultimately, reaching your initial goal. I'm going to finish the planetary, and then starting the next stage is going to guide you through those levels: cosmic, super cosmic, each of the transitional paths.
Yeah, very helpful. And just having the bigger picture map, I think really kind of puts things into perspective.
Yeah, well, that's the key, because there's many people who've done wonderful maps. I think about Paul Twitchell, who is the person who popularized Eckankar. That's the fifth transcendental path in our model. And he has a wonderful map of all the planes of the fifth transcendental path. There's a map for the second transcendental path, the Sant Masters. One of my favorite maps was the one that was done by Swami Muktananda, who started the Siddha Yoga lineage. And he has a map of all the terrain on that level. And the Buddhists talk about Lam Rim, right? All the stages of the path. So this is something that I did. This is when I completed my master's degree, clinical psychology, 1997. And instead of sanely going out and actually doing my hours to become licensed as a therapist, divine will, inner master, said, okay, it's more important that you focus on this, and proceeded to have me meditate on each and every single level of the continuum, every path of the supercosmic, every path of the transcendental, every level of the cosmic, every level of the transplanetary, each and every level in the planetary and the subtle, and what's actually in the personal level, what's in the conscious mind, what's in the subconscious mind, what's in the metaconscious mind. So this is the big map. This is the big picture. So it's not just the map of one path. It's the map of All the paths.
The map of maps. Well, a lot of people really love like Ken Wilber or spiral dynamics, or I don't know if you ego development. I don't know if you've seen any of these like wake up, grow up, show up, all that. And this is like a nodal point on the map that you're talking about.
Yes. And all of this material is valuable, and people get incredible value from learning this, and it can transform their lives. So I don't want to discount it in any way, because if a person fully colonizes and activates a nodal point, they can do a lot to help the world.
Right. I think it's just, it's a theme when you get into consciousness of, oh, and then there's more, right? Like whatever you thought there was it, like, and then there's more, and a both and. It's not one, it's a both and. It's contained inside of a bigger pie. And yeah, I mean, this is just the ultimate example of that.
Well, the way that we determine it is like we say, okay, so let's talk about third transcendental path. So we have what we call an ensouling entity, a soul at that level, and we have what we call the spirit. Okay. And we say, okay, so where did the spirit come from? Where did the soul come from? So to complete that, we liberate the spirit, we liberate the soul. Look at the cosmic and say, okay, so we have an astral soul, and we have these 5, what we call in our tradition, nuclei of identity. Okay, the journey through the cosmic. You finish the first cosmic initiation, you fully develop your cosmic consciousness. You move through the second cosmic initiation, you develop that essence we call the cosmic soul awareness. And you do that, and ultimately the astral soul will merge into the light from which it was born. So we look and see, where are you now? What's the end? Let's get you across that so you complete it. You fulfill that aspect of your spiritual destiny.
I think a lot of people are listening to this and being like, okay, well, how do you tell? Like, how do you know where my soul is at and my cutting edge of spirituality and development?
Well, the Sony Soul Reader.
Available at Radio Shack for $9.99.
Well, before I became a teacher, I was trained for many years in the ability to look with the inner eye, as some people call it the third eye. In our tradition, we call this the attentional principle. And so when you develop that sense of sight very clearly, you can see the soul. You can see the vehicles of consciousness. Your body is on each plane of light. You can see the spirit. You can see other people's attentional principle. You can see what's in the unconscious. You can see all of that. And so I go and I actually measure where you are to the nodal point. So if you are sitting in the Akashic record subplane, third nodal point, I'm going to tell you that's where your soul is right now. This is what's ahead of you on the path. And if you feel you want to transform, and not everybody wants to transform, but if you do, we have a method that will help you do this. And but we identify exactly where you are. We identify exactly how much of the streams, what called the nadamic streams, the channels behind the spirit that you've opened. So we actually look at it. We say, this is exactly where it is. Crystal clear. So there's no doubt about it. We don't listen to Mork. Mork is this voice we all have. This is, well, he's a avatar. He's an avatar.
He's a priestess. Well, George, I mean, this has been a lot of fun. There's so much to explore here. You've created a tremendous body of work in terms of books and webinars and courses that people can take. I'd love for you to give you the opportunity to share more, if this was intriguing, where they can go to learn more about Mudrashram and your teachings.
Yes. Well, number one, you can go to https:// Mudrashram. So think about the words Mudra Ashram and then drop one A. That's the way it's spelled, mudrashram.com. And this is where the bulk of our teachings are. We have a sister site, which is mudrashrampublishing.com. This is where you can order our books. And you can also, there are links to our ebooks as well, which are available on Amazon Kindle. So we have a variety of programs that we offer depending on where you are. Some people just want to read books. You got books, a lot of free articles on there you can read. People want to dip in a little deeper. Well, we've got webinars on different topics that you can take. People want to learn to meditate. If you never meditated before, we have the Introduction to Meditation program, and that's a guided meditation. If you use one of our coaches, and we show you the rudiments of how you actually meditate. Then our bread and butter course, I guess you would say, the key course that is the one that gives you all the keys to transformation, is what we call the Mudrashram Master Course in Meditation. For those of you who can't do an in-person class, we have it available online. And you basically get to see me clean shaven. So that in itself is worth the price.
Priceless.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we also have coaching available for that course. Then you can advance on to the advanced course in meditation, where we show you these higher octaves of the continuum. So if you're at the subtle or the planetary, we show you what's in the transplanetary, what's in the cosmic, what's this super cosmic essence inside me, what are the transcendental paths, what's this highest stage of consciousness in me that we call Satchidananda, or the infinite conscious. What is that? And what is the actual path to when I actually become liberated from birth and death, when I don't have to be reborn in the physical or the astral or any what we call a causal world, any causal mental world. We show you that path in the advanced course. And then beyond that, you can study the correspondence course. We have a program. And then as people advance on our path, there's actually teacher training available. And for people who cannot get themselves to meditate, they got too much going on, we also have coaching programs to help you overcome some of the issues that are keeping you from being able to tap into your spirituality. Some of you have been involved in cults. We have a cult recovery program. Some of you are dealing with the aftermath of an addiction. We have an addiction recovery program. Some of you were so damaged in your relationships or in growing up, we have a dysfunctional family program. And finally, some of you are trying to figure out, well, how do I put my abilities together so that I can, move forward with the things that I intend to do? Well, we have a life coaching program as well. So we have a lot. And so what I'm going to encourage people to do is, if you think this might resonate with you, go to my website, mudrashram.com/contact-us, and schedule what we call a spiritual discovery session. We'll talk about what you're looking for. If we're a good match for you, we'll recommend something for you. If we're not a good match for you, we will tell you, maybe what you need to do is you need to do this instead. You're not ready to do this work. But that's where you want to start. And any of you who want to read some of our articles that are out there for everybody to see, you just go to mudrashram.com/open-stacks. And a lot of our popular articles are out there. You can read them. You get a sense about, what our teachings are, how we apply those teachings. And if it resonates for you, contact me. Set up a discovery session.
Well, that's a very generous offering. We'll make sure to link all those out so people can navigate easily to your rich corpus that you've developed. And George, I just want to say thanks. This was really wonderful. And I would share that I can testify that, having taken a Mudrashram course, it is a rich body of information, and I plan to continue to explore it. So keep up the good work, George.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me today. And Everyone be happy.